Welcome to another episode of Professor and the Idiot, episode 16 maybe? I'm Nick Wolfinger.
And I am Dalton Whitehead.
And this is our podcast. So today we have another guest. I'm pleased to introduce my friend Marina Adshade. She teaches economics at the University of British Columbia. She's the author of a book entitled Dollars and Sex, How Economics Influence Sex and Love. I read the book a couple of years ago when you gave me to a copy and found it really interesting. Anyhow,
Great.
Today we're going to be talking about something she's written more recently, and that's one of her articles in Slate about sex robots. Since I think about sex a lot, this is a topic of natural interest to me. So do you want to tell us about it, Marina?
Yeah, so I also think about sex a lot because I do the economics of sex and love. And one of the things that economists in general are interested in is how technology changes the way that we organize society and the way that we organize our relationships, maybe how it influences marriage. And so lately I've been talking a lot about sex technology and sex robots kind of in general, and how they in the future might have the power to actually shape what we think of as marriage and change the way that we organize our marriages. And so that's what I was really talking about in that Slate article, which was part of a book that was published by MIT Press on the social and ethical implications of sex robots.
Before we continue, can I just ask you a question? What is a sex robot exactly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is no such thing as a sex robot. People talk about sex robots as if there's something like now that is even closer to sex robot, but we don't have anything that's robotic. The dolls that everybody talks about, everybody is like, oh, there's sex robot brothels. Those are literally just inanimate slabs. They're not even heated to body temperature. They don't move. They don't talk. They don't have built-in artificial intelligence. When I talk about sex robots, I kind of use it as a catch-all phrase to just kind of talk about sex technology, and particularly sex technology that has built-in machine learning. And this technology exists. It just doesn't exist in like human robot form. There is technology. There's a new sex toy for women, which isn't on the market yet, called the OSE, that has built-in machine learning and robotics. And so even though it's like not walking around and talking, which is maybe women don't particularly want that anyway, it does all sorts of things that women do want their sex technology to do. So I really mean it as a kind of general, any type of like advanced technology that it will like effectively replace intimacy with humans.
Whoa. Will it do that for you, Dalton?
No, it won't do that for me. But I am curious, when you say intimacy, so to you, this is much more than just a physical sensation? Is this an emotional, an emotional trigger or an emotional tool for people that you are thinking and talking about with this subject?
Well, it means something that like you might fall in love with and form a household with. Because I don't really, that type of technology that is effectively going to replace another human being in your life in more than just a sexual way is this is a really long way off, right? I mean, if you saw these robots now, you'd be wholly unimpressed with what they can do, and there's no reason to think this is going to accelerate particularly quickly. But that doesn't mean you can't have like real affection for them. For example, I know there's a lot of like little robots that are available now that are like they'll walk around on top of your desk, they'll recognize you, and they'll respond to very simple voice commands. And people will form emotional attachments to these, even though they do very, very little. We are, as humans, are very capable of feeling attached to inanimate objects, non-living things, and I think that people will get attached to their sex technology. I think people are attached to things now. Everybody loves to talk about the Japanese and the holograms and those things. I mean, people are capable of forming attachments to non-living technology.
I have a Roomba, a vacuuming robot, and my girlfriend insisted on giving it a name, and we argued over its name, and then I put big googly eyes on it. But I've never yet succumbed to cutting a hole in it and trying to hump it.
I have a robot as well. It's a D-bot. It's not a Roomba, and my daughter has one, and hers is named D. And so when I came to naming mine, I named mine Big D. And so that is my robot. And it's funny because, obviously I'm never going to have a sexual relationship with my robot vacuum. But then I do talk to it, right? I talk to it. I'm like, I appreciate the fact that it cleans my house, and so I actually think that people can have stronger feelings than they think they do with technology. Like, for example, they do these experiments with little really, really basic toys, the type of toys we've had for 20 years. You put batteries in them and maybe they walk around or something like that. And they have people play with these little fluffy toys, and then they put them on the table and they say to the people, okay, now I want you to punch it off the table. And people won't do it. Right?
Those people are weak.
So, I know there have been apps on the phone, available for your phone that will make it vibrate continuously to give it sex toy functionality. I don't know what made me think of that right now.
That doesn't sound very satisfying or hygienic.
So you go on say a little more about how you think it'll function in relationships and marriage. You see it as a good thing. And
yeah.
And let me just insert that, yes, I can clearly see a positive role for technology in relationships already sexually, right? Couples can share sex toys, can share pornography.
Yeah. I was invited to, I'm speaking in front of 2,000 evangelical Christians in Nashville about sex robots next month. And when they invited me, they actually said, we'd like you to bring your positive attitudes about sex robots to our conference. And I thought, I think that's true. I think I do generally have positive attitudes. And I'm not saying there's no downside, but I think that, it just expands the possibility for marriage, right? So for example, there's a lot of people right now who are looking for what we call companionship marriages. Mm-hmm. Those are people who want to have a family, they want to be in a relationship with somebody that they enjoy, whose companies enjoy, but they don't necessarily want to have a sexual relationship with them for whatever reason. It could just be the fact that, they're having a hard time finding somebody who wants to have a family and they enjoy their company and they're sexually attracted to, right, for whatever reason. And there's websites, there's online dating services that match people in these types of marriages. Those type of marriages now, in the absence of technology, either require people to be completely celibate, which is not a good long-run plan, and I would argue not even particularly healthy, or for those people to have sexual relationships outside of their marriage, like have polyamorous type relationships. Technology opens the door to having something else, right? It opens the door to having a committed relationship where you form a family, but where you have sex technology filling the needs of other things that you're not getting from that person. And I don't see how that can possibly be a bad thing. Because, of course, we're not requiring everybody to have one of these, right? It just makes another option for marriage. And I think that this way we're moving anyways to have greater individualization in the type of marriages that people have.
So it may even be a case of one person in a relationship wanting to do some kinky shit that the other person doesn't do. So
yeah. Yeah, I have a friend of mine who's like, she's like, I cannot wait to have a sex robot so that when my husband says, let's have anal sex, I can say, great, here's a robot, I'm going to go watch Netflix, right? And I think there's true, like there's differences in things, and there's some things that people just don't want to do, men and women, right? There are things that people don't want to do, and the technology provides those solutions. There's also
what do I not want to do?
I don't think there is. I would be unsurprised to find there's no limit.
Dalton?
Oh, there's
What's
plenty.
Have you tested his limits, Dalton?
Nick scares me when the subject comes up.
I think that's the intention. Anyway, but it's also too, people who are together for a long time. One of the things that women in particular, they actually have a hard time having sex with somebody for extremely long periods of time. They can do it for like 10, 15, maybe 20 years, but eventually they will get tired of that. And you see this in a lot of relationships where people are no longer really having a lot of fun with their sex. Sex robots that type of technology makes it possible for people to stay together in those relationships without involving other people. I mean, there's nothing wrong with involving other people, but it makes the relationships a darn sight more complicated if you do that. And so you don't have the kind of emotional toll or the emotional risk, and it just makes things a little bit more straightforward. So, and then there's, of course, people who are single, right, who these technologies would really suit.
Certainly. I can certainly see that for for young, frustrated guys.
Well, and also women, right? I mean, there's women who might not want to, add the added complication of having a man in their life for whatever reason. The technology is really handy, right? And especially since we're kind of moving through a period where, as you know, Nick, is that there's this like huge amount of marriage inequality. Sociologists call it something else. What do they call it? The marriage gap or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, and where you got like there are people, and there particularly are men who would like to be married, but can't find somebody to marry. And I think this technology. I don't think the technology will ever be a substitute to having a human spouse. I don't think that's reasonable. I think there's all sorts of stuff that humans bring into our lives. There's no way the technology will ever replace. But in the absence of having that, I think that the technology is really useful. It's funny because I was talking to somebody about there's somebody who actually creates sex technology just a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying that, and she creates technology for women. The technology for women is at this point. Well,
don't leave out the good stuff.
I could, but it's pretty explicit. You sure you want me to say it?
Oh, hell yeah, Dalton.
Okay, so it's
can you handle it?
Yeah, there no subject or talking points are off limits with this podcast.
Okay, so the technology simulates oral sex for women, combined with being fingered. That's what the technology is. Women, once this technology is available, might never want to leave their homes. But people say to her all the time, once this technology gets really good, then women won't need men, right? And I think this is kind of fascinating that people who think that that's all you get from your partner that you're married to is being fingered. Because surely there's more to relationships than
being
that.
fingered.
Than being fingered.
Okay, you heard it here on The Professor and the Idiot. More to relationships than being fingered. Can I go on Oprah now?
As a bunch of women will listen to this and they're like, no, there really isn't. That is it. No. And it's crazy to think that they replace human relationships. I mean, human relationships are messy, but that's kind of one of the good things about human relationships is they're messy, right? I think that we like that element of the relationship. So I don't think that, I often get asked, like, don't you think that, like, the birth rate will fall? And it's like, no, I don't think the birth rate's going to fall. That's crazy. Like, I think that's, like, this is not plausible, right? So, yeah.
Certainly, people like my friend and colleague Brad Wilcox would have that fear that people are going to be so into their fucking machines and their robot boyfriends and girlfriends that they'll stay home and they won't date. In fact, people already have that fear about porn.
I think that what your good friend and colleague and somebody who I respect a lot would actually more likely think is that intimacy is actually an important component of marriage, and that marriages without intimacy are not real marriages, and that they won't stay together and they won't have, they won't continue through time. And it's possible that he's right? There's a lot of stuff that we don't know about this, and one of the reasons that I talk about it is, I'm kind of like an enthusiast a little bit, but it's not that I said enthusiast. I didn't say enthusiastic. Now you totally distracted me. Thank you. I'm not oblivious to the fact that there are possibly negative consequences. There's negative consequences to a lot of things. Like, for example, if instead of being 2019 and us talking about sex technology, it was 2002 and we were talking about social media, that wasn't really available at that time, but was kind of like in the cards and you could see it coming in the future, I can see easily being really enthusiastic about that, right? Wow, what a great way for us to connect to people around the world and, build our networks and share information. And I think it'd be really hard for people to predict all of the negative, very negative consequences that have come from social media, right? And I think that sex technology is the same thing, right? So I can sit here and I can be enthusiastic and I can think about all the many ways that it'll change marriage, some of which are positive. But I actually think the point of having these conversations is not to, like, sell the idea of the technology. It's actually to start a conversation about the technology so we can actually anticipate problems before they come. And that's really my interest in the topic. Is trying to think about what are the possible negative consequences and how can we, as a society now, decide how we want to use them before we arrive at that period.
I think that's honest. I mean, it's hard for me to know, just like your example of social media, how will sex robots and sex tech affect us? I just don't know.
No, I don't know either. Porn is also a good example. But if we could turn back, let me ask you this question. Like, if we could turn back the clock and, like, decide before online porn became available that there would never be online porn, is that something that we would want to do?
Personally, no. Dalton?
Sorry, say that question again. I got a little lost in the middle.
Oh, so if you could turn back time and go back to, like, 1995 and make a decision that there would never be any online porn, would that be something that we would want to do?
I would say probably not. Because to me, it's kind of, like, I'm a libertarian, so it's kind of a freedom thing. And I know there's a lot of negative aspects to it, but I don't really, for me to make a decision for everybody else to stop that from happening seems a little much.
And I would argue that, yes, there's a tiny percentage of people for whom porn is pathological, but that's a really small percentage. And there are a lot of cases that we don't ban things because a tiny percentage suffers. We don't ban alcohol because a small percentage of people will become alcoholic. We don't ban marijuana because a small percentage of people will become total burnouts. And so I see porn the same way. Is that a good take, Dalton, Marina?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is true, but I guess the alternative is, say that we go back to 1995 and we don't ban porn, but then we actually have like an honest conversation about what the nature of porn we want to be. And I know that like Dalton's perspective is on the demand side, but there's also a supply side to porn, right? And
you
so
are an economist, Marina.
Yeah, I am through and through. But I can see Dalton's point that you don't want to restrict what other people consume, but you actually might want to place restrictions on what people produce. That seems very reasonable, right?
Such as, aside from, of course, keeping children out of it, what else?
Oh my gosh! Well, I mean, keeping children out is part of it, but I think that I would want to have conversations about porn that is like openly abusive to women. I think that is something we want to have a conversation with. I think we want to have a conversation about porn coming in from other countries. We talk, if you're a consumer and you go to a store and you buy yourself a shirt, many consumers today want to know in what conditions are the workers who produce that shirt living, right? We have our own labor codes in our country. We like to buy goods from countries that have similar labor codes. Now, I'm a Canadian. This is a Canadian perspective. I understand that. Right. But then we buy porn that's produced in other countries in completely unregulated circumstances, possibly with trafficked people. I think that we'd want to control that. I think that would be a good thing. But the point is, we can't go back to 1995 and do all of these things, but we can look forward about sex technology, right? And think about what do we want it to look like? Like, for example, it's always the elephant in the room is, do you think there's, I don't want an answer to this actually, but you can answer if you want, about whether or not we should have sex robots that look like children, right?
That's actually the subject I was going to bring up.
Ew.
If that's something you've thought about.
Ew.
Well, I think it's something we all thought about. It's impossible to go down this road without thinking about this topic.
Ew.
Yeah, we've had Canadian border security has caught 300 of these sex dolls coming across the border just in the last couple of years.
You mean baby sex dolls?
Well, I don't know if they're babies.
Or children, yeah.
I think the rule is under 4'9". So dolls under the 4'9" are confiscated. I don't
what
have
about
a definitive...
people who like little people or dwarves?
I'm actually not opposed to dwarf dolls, but there's a big difference between looking like a dwarf doll and looking like a child.
Well, okay, let me take a potentially unpopular view here. So although it's so disturbing, suppose then that leads to pedophiles doing their thing with dolls and not people. Is there some benefit there?
Well, there would be, but the problem is that, in terms of, for example, if that was true, we would think that we would observe that potential pedophiles who have used child pornography are less likely to offend. But actually, people who use child pornography are more likely to offend, not less. And it's a complement. It's not a substitute. And so I don't know about the dolls. Maybe the dolls are a substitute. We, of course, wouldn't know unless we had a randomized, experiment. But we're never going to be able to have a randomized experiment because it's not like you can put a call out. It's like we'd like all non-offending pedophiles to contact us. Right. We've got an idea, and then you're going to let us know if you offend. Right. I mean, this is never going to happen, right? I know, so it's really hard to judge, right?
I know it doesn't prove anything, but the rate of rape has declined a lot in this country in the last 20 years over the same years that internet porn exploded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is true, right? Yeah. But it's not necessary. That I agree with completely. And this is the main reason for allowing porn, in my view, is that it is a substitute to other, antisocial / criminal / potentially very harmful behaviors. I'm just not sure that we really know that about pedophiles and sex robots.
God, I mean, this is all interesting to me, but a lot of it just feels so speculative.
Welcome to the future, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, it is all speculative. it is like, there's a lot of people, and I will tell you this, is that there's a lot of people out there who claim to be futurists and make predictions about the future who haven't got the slightest clue what they're talking about. And I think that academics have a tendency not to do that because they don't like to speculate. But unless we move into that space will be entirely occupied by people who really don't know anything about, the world, not the way that we know about the world. And so I think that academics need to be a little bit braver about these things. We need to be a little bit prepared to ask the question, what will happen in the future? And economists, we can't even predict what's going to happen tomorrow. We're not particularly good at it. We try. It's an important part of our job. It's much harder for us to say, what's going to happen in 30 years? What's going to happen in 40, 50 years? What is the social change that we're going to see? Yeah, exactly. But you don't think it's still worth having the conversation? Right?
Wow. I'm interested in seeing what's going to happen with sex robots and other sex technology like VR, but I can't even forecast in my own field. It's just it's hard. It's so hard. It makes me not want to do it.
Yeah. Well, you're still a respected academic. So.
I don't know about that.
Is that true?
Yeah. Sources vary. Have you been to one of those sex robot brothels, Marina, for professional purposes?
So no. Yeah. What's interesting is that they don't last very long. So there was this huge show here in Vancouver, sex robot brothel opening. I spent like an entire day doing media about it. The media also spoke to the brothel owners, and then they disappeared 3 weeks later. And in one of the media sources who had spoken to brothel owners, I said to her, this brothel is gone. And she's like, yeah, it does appear to be gone. So she phoned like the owner who she had spoken to previously, and the person said, oh, that wasn't me. I don't know what you're talking about. It didn't last, and the one in Toronto didn't last, because the technology is not what people think it is. Like and the prices are they're expensive.
How much
here,
would it cost?
It was $85 for half an hour.
Whoa.
So I don't know what the price of I don't actually know what the price of a sex worker is in Vancouver, but my guess is it's not that far off that price. And so if you can have an actual human being who can do a whole variety of things that the dolls cannot do, then why would you pay for the doll, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a lot of money to fuck a piece of plastic.
Yes.
I think half of it's going to the cleanup guy.
I hope more than half.
That's a tough job.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that it's, you mentioned VR, and VR is a good example of where like the technology has moved glacially slowly. I mean, VR movies, you could watch them in the mid 1990s, and you look at them now, and you're not blown away by the technology. There's no VR theaters. We're not sitting at home watching amazing VR films because the technology.
I have a Vive, the VR headset for gaming. Mm-hmm. Have you tried it, Dalton?
Yeah, I tried it once at your place.
Okay.
I think I played for like 10, 15 minutes, and then I stopped, and I was like, oh, I'm glad I stopped, because I think I was about to get sick.
And did you try it on porn? I have.
No, I did not.
I don't think I remember actually talking about this with Brad Wilcox, where I was his anthropologist exploring an exotic tribe. Of course, Brad would never try it, and it's not a game changer. It doesn't,
Nope.
You've tried it, Marina?
No, I've never tried. I've tried gaming, and I've seen the movies. I've never seen the porn, although I've had lots of opportunities to do it, because I know somebody here in Vancouver who does. They produce VR porn for couples.
Yeah.
So like you can actually, anyway, and everybody tells me the same thing. It's like, yeah, well, what? It's not like, it's not amazing. But it's one of those, but because people actually really become disillusioned because you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. And then like 10 years later, you're like, what happened to that technology we were going to get?
Yeah.
And I think that the sex robots, I think there's a lot of potential for the same, where people genuinely think these things do a whole bunch of stuff they don't do. The brothel here in Vancouver is like, they've got like little bios for the dolls, and it's like she's your chatty playmate. She could sit up and talk to you all night. She's available to go for dinner and for vacations, and it's like, you're going to take like this 130-pound piece of silicone to a restaurant? That doesn't make any sense, right? Actually, I'd like to see it for sure.
I do want to see that. Make fun of that person.
Yes, well, maybe we should go to Japan. I think there'll be opportunities for this if we went to Japan.
I'm going to Japan just on vacation next month for 10 days.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to hear. Are you going to go to any of like the? There's a sex robot strip club there. Stuff like that.
I will. I'm going with my girlfriend. I will talk to her, but that sounds interesting. Yeah, we've already heard it. Yeah, I think she already has a bar that's where all the employees are robots on her radar. I don't know if that's the same thing.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. I'm looking forward to seeing pictures.
I doubt they let you take pictures in those things.
Yeah, maybe.
Hey, let me ask you about something you said earlier about the supply side of porn and wanting to limit porn that depicts women being hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
For the same reasons. We want to be careful about pedophiles and child pornography. Is that it's very, very possible that it's not a substitute to that behavior. It actually encourages and normalizes that behavior.
But do you believe that more broadly? Because then that would really suggest that a lot of porn is fucking up a lot of men.
No, I don't, because there's a difference between like normal, healthy sexual behavior that involves like consent and antisocial abusive behavior that doesn't involve consent. And I don't think that because the evidence is just not there, is that, the type of people who are watching the first type of porn, whatever that looks like, right? That they're, that's just consenting behavior, right? So when they, for example, when they say that porn reduces rape rates, right? They're not specifically talking about porn where a guy is out raping a woman, right? Yeah. You could see that would be a totally different type of porn, and that actually might encourage the behavior.
Maybe, but I don't know.
I would guess that it does, based on what we know about pedophilia and child porn.
We're not talking about that. We're just talking about
We're
just talking about sex that's that demeans women or depicts violence against women. I don't know. Do you have any other takes on porn, Dalton? Any feelings?
I definitely feel like since I don't have kids, I'm not sure how good preventing kids from seeing it is, but I do hope that's something that is being, it's never going to be foolproof, but I hope it is as close to foolproof as we can get, because I definitely think I don't think it's good for kids to have access to that type of stuff.
Why?
Because you can see some gnarly shit.
That's true, but
not just good old-fashioned regular stuff. You can see some stuff that can make a very large impression on young people for the rest of their lives. And I don't like the idea of young. I'm talking about like elementary school, maybe young junior high age kids seeing that stuff.
I mean, certainly the opportunities to see porn were far lower when I was a kid, but I guess at that age all I had was magazines.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Well, is there anything we haven't covered?
Well, there's lots of stuff we haven't covered,
Okay.
but actually the one thing that we haven't covered, which I think is interesting, is that we did talk about the brothels, but about the another thing that is, I think, a reason to be encouraged about this technology is that is how it affects actual sex markets, right? Like the actual
What's
sex
a sex
trades.
market? Oh, you mean yeah? Oh, go on. Sorry.
Yes, like prostitution,
Yeah.
right? I think that that's really interesting application of this technology, right? Is you have trafficked women in the U.S. We have trafficked women in Canada. I actually have zero problem if women want to sell sex and that they're they're not either economically or otherwise being forced into it. But the availability of this technology, I'm hoping, right, will resolve some of the issues in that market. I think that there's a benefit there, so we'll see what happens with that.
I hope so, but we don't really know. I do think probably all of us are united in wanting to see prostitution legalized for the well-being of the sex workers. I'm sure that's part of your libertarianism, Dalton.
Anything libertarian, I am on board for.
All right. Well, I can go at you again for that some other time, but
I know enough about libertarians to know that there's not consensus on a variety of different issues.
Oh yeah,
right?
there's giant rifts in the libertarian area.
There's giant rifts. So it's there doesn't seem to be a lot of consensus. So it'd be hard to agree with everything.
I'm a pretty newbie libertarian, so I'm flexible and I'm not very firm in most of my beliefs. Guns, free speech, I'm anti-war. Those are my main three that I'm all about.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you see happening in the market? You see less interest in men seeking out sex workers because of robots?
I think that, if the technology was good, I think that would absolutely be true. But, it's the market, even for men, is risky. There's the risk of exposure to sexually transmitted diseases.
Right.
It's expensive. It's heavily stigmatized. And I don't think that would really go away very quickly with legalization. But since the U.S. is not getting legalization anytime soon,
right,
it's also illegal, right? So it's got those kind of 4 counts against it. And so I think that the technology that was safer and had less risk attached to it, and maybe was less stigmatization, although, it would almost certainly, I would suspect, still be stigmatized.
Yes.
There's no reason for it to be illegal, right?
Right.
I think that it will attract buyers to that market.
I think that's reasonable to argue.
Yeah.
Is prostitution illegal in Vancouver?
So in Canada, the selling of sex, we have a modified Scandinavian model. So we have selling is legal, buying is illegal.
Is that good for the sex workers?
I have a friend who's a sex worker who says that they like it a lot because it keeps the prices high. Okay. So, I don't know a single sex worker who wants it legalized. I know that us in but that's not saying that there aren't sex workers there are clearly sex workers who want it legalized, but there's not consensus on this point. There's lots of sex workers who don't want to legalize because the lack of legalization is keeping the pay high.
Right.
And away from regulation. When you have a legalization, that almost always comes with regulation and taxation, and so there's not a lot of consensus on this topic, and it's actually almost impossible to talk about sex work without upsetting somebody, because it's very contentious, even within the sex work community itself.
I certainly can see that just in the ways that pornography has split feminist communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm actually not wild about having it fully legalized in Canada. It's fully legalized in New Zealand. There's the only restrictions are you can't buy sex from a minor, and you have to use a condom 100% of the time.
That's good.
Yeah, that seems like a very reasonable law. And of course, but New Zealand is an island in the South Pacific, and getting to New Zealand is expensive, and so they're not going to attract a big inflow of sex tourism. Whereas in Canada, given that we're next to you guys and that it's so illegal there, and we're so accessible, if Canada had legalized prostitution, we would have a lot of sex tourism, and I think that's something the country would need to consider whether or not they actually want to do that.
That's an interesting point where really your laws affect your neighbors.
Yes, your laws affect us all the time, though. So it's yeah.
Sorry, America Junior.
No, we're not. We are not.
I know.
I'm gonna have to hang up right now.
No, I know.
America Junior. That's so great. I love that.
Well, we have legalized cannabis across the country, not just in a one place to the next.
Dalton's going to defect right now.
Nah, the government's too powerful in Canada.
No, a lot of things work really well in Canada.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, a lot of things. The healthcare is a complicated subject there, but a lot of things really work well. There was not as big a financial crisis in 2008 just because of more regulated markets. Yeah.
It's interesting because Americans have a tendency to think that they have more liberty than we have, but in many ways you have more regulation. Like, for example,
terrible.
we can import as much French cheese as we like, okay? I can go and buy unpasteurized French cheese, and you can't buy it in the States. So it's not necessarily true that it's not. I don't think, by the way, a single Canadian thinks the Canadian government's more powerful than the American government, just for the record. But,
right.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of that.
Yeah.
But there's cheese. Oh, the French cheese and the power of the government. But there's no way I could be a citizen in a country with a leader like that weirdo Trudeau.
Why? What's wrong with Trudeau?
No, I love him.
Did you see that video where I don't know much about his policies, but did you see that video where he talks about being a boxer?
No.
Oh, Nick, you got to look it up. It's so funny. He's like telling his girlfriend, he's like, "I'm a fighter. It's like what I do." Or so, I never get the exact quote, but it's so hilarious.
So this is like from 15, 20 years ago?
I don't. How old is he? He's not that old, is he?
48.
I don't think it was that long ago. I don't know. I'll send you a link to it, Nick. But it's hilarious.
No, that's fine. You know what? Nobody gets to. You guys are definitely not going to win we have the better leaders than you competition.
Yeah.
No, I hate Trump. He's not. He's like the opposite of libertarian. So I don't like him.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I like our prime minister.
Yeah.
And what I really like him is that he has, in many ways, encouraged Canadians to live up to their own expectations of themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a good leadership quality, right?
I'm largely a fan, for the record, of Trudeau, too.
I mean, he may not be perfect. You may not like his socks and the fact that he does his hair a certain way. And these are things that people complain about. But at the end of the day, the kind of motto is better is always possible. And I actually think that's a good thing, right? It's just to tell people,
so too. Yeah.
You can be better.
Yeah.
Striving to be better. So
I think that's one thing a leader should convey, a sense of national optimism.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think we've wandered far off topic, but that's okay. Thanks so much for your time, Marina.
Yeah, fun to talk to you.
Yeah, of course, I'll see when you've written something new about sex robots, and maybe when the tech changes and there's, we can revisit this some point.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to do that.
And do you have a podcast?
I do not.
Oh, okay.
But you were starting to one at one point, right?
I was starting one, but I've got so many things on my plate. There's only so much that I can do. So I'm working on other things.
Tell us about one of them quickly.
Because I do work on women and the economy. I'm doing a lot of work at the moment. Actually, I'll tell you something more interesting. One of the things I'm actually doing, and I can only say so much now that I've started down this road, is working on as an expert on a lawsuit that involves strippers. That's all I can really say. So I'm doing more of that sort of thing.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
And
in fact, when I finish talking to you, I'm going to call the Executive Clubs of America, which is a big umbrella organization that for all the strip club owners. I'm going to give their person who runs it a call because she's great, and I'm going to get some information off her. So I'm doing lots of things.
I always knew it was possible to make a lot of money off stripping.
Well, you could have a second career.
All right. Well, thanks, Marina.
All right. It was nice talking to you guys.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. It was a great conversation, and we should definitely have another one if something major comes out on this subject, or if you have another subject you want to talk about, come back on.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. Remember, if you like what you heard in The Professor and the Idiot, go to Apple Podcasts or wherever else fine podcasts are found, and give us a good review to help other people find it and grow our social media empire. Thank you.